Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Sabiha, for the introduction, and Professor Manish for the welcome. Herewith, I'll not take uh, any more time in any kind of formalities, and I'll straight away come to the part of the main purpose that I am here for: blockchain technology internals. In the first session in the morning that I was purview to, I was there for about 15-20 minutes at times for intermittently, and I am generally aware of what has been covered. So there may be few repeats, but on those repeat topics, I will not be focusing much. I'll be focusing on whatever has not been covered in detail that I feel, and there may be few slides that I will deliberate upon, and there will be few slides that I will just rush upon, and I take them that they are understood and interpreted well already by you. So, in the next about 2 hours, just scribble and think. Do not, no need to write down anything, because I'll be sharing this presentation with Dr. Piyush at the end of the talk. Focus on the terms of which most of you will be familiar with, and most of new terms may originate that you may just note down and scribble further. Questions may be posted in the chat window. I'll have a look at the end of the talk at around 17:30. In the presentation, I have not included anything per se peculiar to any kind of investment advices, etc. Because at times, even in colleges, whenever I have given a talk in universities, I generally do not get any technical questions. I basically get around why should we invest in the this matter or not, etc. So not included anything. So focus will be on the technology internals part, and in next about 120 minutes, so I'm not here to bombard you with any kind of technology dump that I am aware of, and then I am just dumping off to you. But my purpose is that you all get aware from a bird's eye perspective of what blockchain in totality is. uh, in the sessions that you might have attended earlier, not peculiar to this FDP, but in any of the forums or seminars, there you might have jumped directly into any kind of direct topic of blockchain, that is a DAO or a smart contract or NFTs, etc. But from a very generic skeletal point of view, what's the spirit of blockchain? That will be the focus of what lies behind blockchain and what mechanizes it. So the purpose is that I'll acquaint you of the blockchain and cryptocurrency technology, blockchain foundation basics, discussion on backend workings, few simulations and applications that I'll be using and working upon. And at the end of it, in case time permits, we'll see some kind of use cases on the criminal part of Bitcoins that is being exploited by the cyber criminals. So cryptocurrency technology. So there are two words basically that we will focus here is one is crypto and the other is currency. And then of course technology is there. So cryptocurrency technology. First of all, what is the relation between Bitcoin and blockchain? Because in any of the discussions that I have, if he's a newbie, if he's just will on at the onset journey, so he mixes these two terms relatively with each other. But there is a small difference between both the terms. That is, just like Microsoft Word is an application which is run on an operating system, similarly, Bitcoin is an application of blockchain which is run on it. So, from a very layman's perspective, the simplest way that we can differentiate between Bitcoin and blockchain is that Bitcoin is an application of blockchain. So, the backend working of the Bitcoin cryptocurrency is blockchain. And in the course of this presentation, that all the slides that you see here with uh, Bitcoin, whenever I use the term Bitcoin, it will be peculiar to the application. And blockchain technology, when I use, so it will be peculiar to the backend applications. So for example purpose, I'll be taking on few Bitcoin blocks, few Bitcoin explorers, etc. So it is not necessary that that's the complete blockchain. It is just one application, and there are other applications as well with respect to cryptocurrencies. In case we see, so there are many Ethereum, Monero, etc. And then the multiple numbers of applications which are evolving that might have already been discussed, but they are different applications. So the other part is blockchain. So again, there are two words: blockchain. So blockchain is an ecosystem of multiple technologies. So blockchain is just not one software that we can download it in one PC and we can implement it in a college environment or a university or a corporate office. It is a ecosystem of multiple technologies, and these multiple technologies we'll touch upon this today in next duration of the presentation. Okay, so this I've already said. So blockchain technology has been driving Bitcoin since 2009 non-stop. So here we see blockchain, the platform, and Bitcoin, the application. So that platform has been running the Bitcoin absolutely independently since 2009 without any third-party mediations. And what is the purpose of Bitcoin? Why did Bitcoin arrive in the scene in 2008? So everyone has his own views and interpretation. So first few about 5-10 minutes I'll be focusing on the reason behind and small history about Bitcoin. So investor, basically he wants to become rich. For him Bitcoin is one via media of getting rich in a short time. Technologists like all of us in the FDP here, we see a lot of technicality in here. We see lots of calculations here, cryptography here in particular. Then the common man, basically he is only interested from point of view of the investment. And for your surprise, in last about 1 year, the Indians have invested about 40 billion dollars in the cryptocurrencies. 40 billion dollars, that's about 25,000 tons of gold. That's just for reference. Now this I'm telling you not just to build up the momento that cryptocurrencies and bitcoins and blockchains are here to stay. They are not going anywhere. They are here to stay, and they are here to embed in our routine soon. So crypto investments in India gain significant traction. Yes, okay. Multinationals. How do multinationals see Bitcoin and blockchain? They see that this is the future. Multinationals. You take any top 500 multinationals, you will see there's some part of blockchain association relative to their organization, and they have invested billions of dollars already. And not far is the government of India too. So there are various perceptions by government also. So government over last about 4 5 years has been vocal about its own views about Bitcoin. So India's government wants to kill Bitcoin, but it loves blockchain. So you might have already now realized what Indian government basically means. Bitcoin, no. Blockchain, yes. And going further, PM Modi has been very vocal about this technology, blockchain. The latest addition in this documentation part from the government side is the blockchain, the Indian strategy document. Now, this is a very important document, about 60 pages, 60-65 pages, and it gives out a very in-depth detail of what government realizes of plans to implement blockchain in multiple domains in India. It is in healthcare, it is in voting, it is in land, it is in registries, it is in education, certifications, any kind of credentials, voter IDs, etc. So they have got huge plans, and this they have aptly covered in this document. So this is for this is not very technical, but it is meant for the layman. So in case layman can understand, so at least we can understand it in a much better way and realize it to relate with the routine. So this is just one map. I'm not going to discuss about all the states here, but just give you a glance view about 2 years back what the states were involved in. So we see majority of the states, even Dr. Piyush Shukla had in the opening address today mentioned about 25-26 states are already into various projects of blockchain, and they are all multiple applications. They are not something that they are common to each other or the common vendor is there. No, they are all doing in different tangents, different domains. But from a general perception, the cryptocurrencies are basically used for cybercrime. That's the basic perception. But for your surprise, in 2011-12, yes, 10% of the cryptocurrency transactions were related to some kind of cybercrime. But over last 10 years, down the decade, in 2021, that is the last year, and this year, in last 1 year, the percentage of transactions has basically come down to 0.34 percentage as per one chain analysis company, which is which basically monitors all the cryptocurrencies transactions and various stats about the cryptocurrencies peculiarly. So it is not that Bitcoin is been only being only exploited by cyber criminals. No, it is basically being used in most of the countries now, legal also. So again, that is just for a mention. Transactions per day now, 3,50,000 transactions per day to about 4 lakh transactions per day is the average of Bitcoin. Now, whenever I speak of any stat, mostly it will be related to Bitcoin. So this is for last about 2 3 years. We see the general tendency of Bitcoin transactions per day has been around floating between 3 and 4 lakhs. At times it has even gone beyond 4 lakhs, about 4 and a half lakhs per day, the number of transactions, and this has been on a increasing spree. Increasing spree means as the countries are legalizing it, as various domains are accepting it, so the transactions are basically increasing. And this is one point that you can just note down and basically explore more. Transactions rate per second. What is the Bitcoin transaction rate per second? It is about 7 to 8 transactions per second. But what is the exact requirement? Basically, this is just for from a technical keenness of, in case we are planning a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin to be ubiquitously used across the countries. So what parameters it should reach? The Visa, Mastercard, etc. They are conducting transactions at the rate of about 1,700 transactions per second. 1,700, and Bitcoin is at about 7. So that's basically the difference of, and now why is this delay happening and what are the parameters, etc. Again, as we go into the details, we'll come to know of this. Major characteristics of blockchain. Now these are the 5 major characteristics, but I am not going to discuss them here. At the end of the presentation, this slides, I think I've kept it again, because by that time, decentralization, neutrality, transparency, open access, immutability, all these things will be amply clear. So not discussing it individually here. So what is the actual intent? So this is the definition part. Cryptocurrency is an attempt to bring back a decentralized currency of people, one that is not subject to inflationary moves by the nations. So what does it mean simply? Simply, it means that there has to be no government intervention or any other third party intervention between a buyer and a seller. In case there is a transaction taking place between a buyer and a seller, this transaction has to be solely kept within the knowledge of the buyer and the seller, and it should not be known to anybody. So third party vendors, like in case we do any kind of transactions today, the common man, either he's paying cash, or in case he is not paying cash, then he is on the digital side. In case he is on the digital side, then he'll be using either Visa, Mastercard, Paytm, etc. So whatever media that he is using for paying, either a bank, etc., there will be a third eye watching that transaction, will which is one of the reasons of Bitcoin to come up successfully across the globe. So what did blockchain technology achieve here? So suppose we are saying the third party is watching, the third party, the government is watching, it is being monitored, transactions are being seen by RBI, etc. So what did blockchain technology achieve? And it is not peculiar to India that RBI is watching or government is watching. It is a global fact that what blockchain has achieved: negation of the middleman. Now, negation of the middleman means the third party which was basically monitoring it has been negated. What does the middleman do? For example, we'll take the case of banks. Now, banks, uh, this basically slide shows the Indian banks, a group of banks. Basically, each of us will be having some account in either of the banks here. So, what are we actually gaining from bank? Some kind of percentage savings bank, or fixed deposits, or there are multiple purposes of a bank: acceptance of deposits, it acts as a agent, overdraft facility, etc. Basically, every there is a function behind each of these purpose that is written here. But what did blockchain do? So if all these purpose, now if I trust a bank, I do a transaction with a bank, I transfer some amount from location A to B. So what does it mean? That I am trusting a bank. as a third party, it is trustworthy and I can deposit my money, it will not run away. That's the kind of trust that I have between a service and as a customer. So bank is providing me the service and I am paying for it in some form. So if this complete thing of trust is replaced by an algorithm, that's what blockchain is all about. So when blockchain is actually extended much beyond this particular function after about 2014 when Ethereum had come. So smart contracts came, DAOs came, decentralized autonomous organizations. But for today, we realize that for this part of the presentation that blockchain has been able to remove that third party and run the transactions between buyers and sellers globally on its own. So now important history. Now a few slides on the history part. History part, it is not the typical history that we read in chapters, but these four persons that I'll be discussing here, if you read their papers, these papers, okay, now Bitcoin did not come overnight. When we say that blockchain is an amalgamation of technologies, it means that there are a number of technologies, proven technologies, which have already existed with us for last decades, for about 5, 6, 7, 8 decades. They are varying in nature, and the important history part becomes 1982. David Shom, now he is a computer scientist. He is still there, and in 1982 he proposed the concept of blind signatures. He proposed the concept of blind signatures primarily for the purpose that envisaging that there will be privacy concerns after 30 years, 40 years, whenever e-banking starts, whenever e-transactions start. So he proposed at that time, about 40 years back, the concept of blind signatures. Now this paper is again about 8 pages, 7, 8 pages, but it is a must read so that you come to know of where it all started. And sooner or later you will all connect all these papers, whatever I'm mentioning here, with the Satoshi Nakamoto paper and the complete technology behind the blind signature for untraceable payments. That's the title of the paper. Again, after 6 years, the same guy, David Shom, he came up with another paper that introduced the extended the earlier work of blind signatures. Now, blind signatures, what he proposed was that between a buyer and a seller, in case they do a transaction, so that will not be known to anybody else, but there was a limitation in that. He proposed that thing, he applied cryptography in it, but there was a flaw in it. Flaw in it means there had to be a bank in between who will take stock of all these transactions, etc. So again, this was the next paper that he came up with, untraceable electronic cash. And in this paper, apart from the earlier achieved results, he also was able to give some messages along with that transactions, which he had conducted and proposed to be done with blind signatures between a buyer and a seller. So this is another paper that I'll recommend to read. 97, that is at the time when emails had just come to the common man. I opened my first Yahoo account in 97, and I'm pretty much aware of 1997 that there was a huge crisis, basically not crisis, but huge problem of spamming emails. So even if I open a new email account, I used to be bombarded at that time with lots of spam. So Adam Back, he introduced the concept of hash cache. Now hash cache is, again, this concept has been used in blockchains. Hash cache is, now if I am a regular user, if I have to send a mail to you, a single person or two persons or three persons, CC, BCC, etc. So whenever I do this email, my computer will have to perform some kind of computation to prove that I am sending this mail genuinely. I am not spamming. But for a spammer will never do one single mail. He will always be interested in sending thousands of mail at at one go. So how will that be controlled by Adam Back? Now Adam Back introduced this hash cache. So if somebody is intending to send 5,000 emails at one go, so he should be able to have that much of computing power also in his computer, which basically negates uh, email spam with a thumb rule kind of a method. So you, in case you are sending a single mail, no problem, you can send it your computer will easily send it because it needs a small computation. But when you send about 5,000 emails at a time, so your PC should be capable of this holding and performing that kind of computation, which in case not possible, in case your PC is not capable of doing that computation, etc., then there those mails will not be sent, basically taking a control, holding those mails, spam mails. So 1998, now we die, this computer engineer introduced the concept of proof of work. Now, proof of work is one of the most important things that I will also discuss today, and you might already be aware to some extent about what proof of work is. There was a question in the morning what nonce is actually. So, here in the presentation, I'll be basically giving you out the basic threadbare thing of what zeros are we talking about, why are we doing that mathematics, why are we creating that difficulty, why are we working to find that target value which has to be taken into consideration for finding the nonce, etc. So we'll just hold on. In next about 15-20 minutes we will reach that stage. So in after all these works, and these are four works that I have mentioned, otherwise there are whole lot of works which needs to be mentioned, but peculiarly I have chosen four works which I have shown here because they'll be connected somewhere with the talk today. So and then in 2008 the magic happened, that is the blockchain, the Bitcoin currency arrived. So Bitcoin wouldn't be widespread if it did not solve the real problems for real people. Now any technology just cannot become a hit, it has to have some kind of acceptance at the common man's regime. So there has to be a acceptance level at a bigger scale of population willing to use it. Now why did Bitcoin become so widespread? What problems did Bitcoin solve? So apart from the earlier one that I had mentioned, that Bitcoin was able to remove the third party, what were the other problems? Now problems with money, there are four reasons I'm not discussing in much. Segregation, basically you will be able to interpret that from a bank perspective there are two guys, one with their account, one not with the account. So as per the World Bank, as on date, in the current world population, 28% of the guys do not have a bank account. So these whatever buyers, sellers, whatever transactions they do, they uh, are limited by their usage, they are confined to a local area, so they need a currency which they can use from their location to anywhere across the continent. There has to be ubiquitous usage of some kind of currency. Privacy, of course we will not discuss, privacy is one issue. Then inflation, governments basically of respective countries, they tweak various parameters in finance to increase the cost, to basically decrease the debt of the nation, etc., and they keep playing with so much of things for their for the country's betterment, etc. But at the end of it, who is affected? The common man. He is being affected with the inflation part. So again, the other part is international borders. In case I have to send some money across to the continent today, no need to zoom here. Basically this is a basic chart of what kind of transactions amount and what kinds of fees are applicable in case I am planning to send some amount to a European country. So in all it comes to around 5 to about 9%. So in case I'm planning to send about 1,000 rupees, so of that 8 7 8% will de facto be taken by the third party who is just coordinating the payments to send from one place to another. So how Bitcoin solves these issues globally? So why did it come? How did it come? And what happened? So in 2008, so this was the ice breaking kind of a time when all these four reasons, segregation, inflation, and the international borders, that the inflation part, so all these were the already existing issues. And now then this happened, financial crisis of 2008. In 2008, when this financial crisis happened in around July 2008, after these again were attributed to various policies by banks, by government, etc. So after about 3 months, July it happened, and October 31st, 14:10 hours. So at this time, this paper was uploaded. This is Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. This was one paper by Satoshi Nakamoto. This is 9 pages only. And for most of you, including me, When I first read the paper, I could not go beyond the first second page, maybe second page onwards. It was pretty complex. It expects a lot of background knowledge from you in terms of cryptography, hashes, Merkle trees, etc., digital signatures, etc. Everything you should be aware, and then in case you read this paper, you will be able to make head and tail out of it. So I strongly recommend that in case you have not read this paper, you try reading this. Most of it has originated, each thick book, each blockchain book or manual, etc., whatever has been released, it is based on this paper, the first paper on blockchain. So Bitcoin solved all these issues: segregation, privacy issues, inflation, borders, etc. Now how so before we come to how, we'll just discuss brief about Satoshi Nakamoto. So he remains unknown for most of you. If you are not aware, Satoshi Nakamoto, who uploaded the paper, he is an anonymous guy till date. Nobody knows who created it and what was his name. Was he a team of individuals or was he a single person? Even there have been guessworks like by the late John McAfee that Bitcoin creator Satoshi Nakamoto is a group of Indians. So that's again remains a guess. That was about 2 years back from here, April 25. Then after that paper in October uh, 2008, Satoshi Nakamoto released the first Bitcoin software for this. That was uploaded on 9th January 2009. This was version 0.1. On this paper, on this software, he participated in a community of about less than about 50, 60 people, all complete technicals. And there is a book by the name of Satoshi's Mails, or Satoshi's, there's some book on Amazon, which basically compiles all those discussions which have taken place at that point of time, 2008-9, about 1 year, all the mails and all the discussions that Satoshi Nakamoto had with the concepts of blockchain with the normal community. So each one of them is listed. So after doing lots of work, improvement in that 0.1 version of the software, he continued to collaborate. And thereafter, in 2010, he handed over the complete source code repository to Gavin Anderson, which is again available for your perusal anywhere, anytime on the website. And after transferring most of the related domains, etc., he simply vanished. And thereafter, he has not been seen on the web. Originating from that one Bitcoin, that one paper, today there are about 5,000 plus cryptocurrencies. But with the arrival of NFTs, I can say about 8,000 plus cryptocurrencies exist today. 8,000 plus cryptocurrencies. So statistics, this is a 2 year old basic stats that we see here. So that's basically giving an idea of how much money is involved globally. And for the technicals, the thing is, most of them, almost all of them, they do things differently. They have different block sizes, they have got different consensus, they have got different configurations. There may be permissionless blockchains, there may be permissioned blockchains, then there may be smart contracts compatible, etc., etc. There are so many things, so they all work differently. So the total market capital, this is just a stat. So as on 26th July, that is today, one Bitcoin is worth approximately about $37,000. That's about 27 lakhs. So that's again reviving the interest of the common man. So how does a Bitcoin look? When we look at the web, what Bitcoin looks like from an image point of view, it basically shows some lots of compelling graphics. But ultimately, one Bitcoin looks like this: 145482, etc. What you see, the jumbled text here, that's one Bitcoin address. Now, why? How did this Bitcoin address originate? And what are public keys and private keys? So we'll discuss in brief ahead of how are these public and private keys running the show, and how the Bitcoin address is generated from a single private key. So for any user who is willing to do a transaction and join the network, he has to have a public and a private key. And there is no need to buy these keys. You simply go, download the blockchain, download the wallet, and you are ready to go. You can create your own private keys and public keys, and you can do the transactions. You can ask somebody to send some satoshis to you in case you are unable to buy any from anywhere. So Bitcoin is often advertised as anonymous. On the uh, now you should not confuse with the bitcoins what the exchanges talk about in the advertisements, in the routine advertisements that you get, mm, um, so much promotions that buy bitcoin for 100 rupees, 200 rupees, 500 rupees. You should not confuse that bitcoin with this bitcoin. In the question answer session, when we have at the end, somebody just remind me, I'll make this difference clear. That for now, on a local internet, so local means on the global internet, bitcoin is a advertised as a anonymous thing, but it is not a anonymous. There is nothing anonymous about a bitcoin. Bitcoin is the most open source, most transparent thing that anybody can have till date. Bitcoin is pseudonymous, so it is not anonymous. Anonymous means you will not be ever be able to link with anybody. But what is pseudonymity? So bitcoin is pseudonymous. Pseudonymous means in case I have to do a transaction, I will not be doing the transaction as Anupam Tiwari. I'll be doing the transaction as a public key, that public key address that I had shown you. And when I do a transaction as a public key, my name will not be associated with that public key anywhere on the network. So I am pseudonymous entry as that address 148, whatever number starts with the public key address. So I am that. I'm not Anupam Tiwari. I am that public key on the blockchain network. So Bitcoin, just to make you remember this, Bitcoin is not designed to be anonymous. As on date, there are currencies like Monero. Monero is one currency which is designed to be anonymous. They use ring signatures. Ring signatures in the sense, there will, although there may be one single buyer, there may be one single seller, but there will be about 50 people signing that transaction for problems to the LEAs, the law enforcement agencies. They'll not be able to make out anything out of those single transaction because they'll be signed by 50 people. Now, who has done it? That nobody will ever come to know. So, devil lies in the details. So now we get into the details part. What happens behind the scenes? So, first thing, what blockchain is? Of course, we now have a general idea from point of view of what block. There are two words basically: block and chain. So this I have already said, but again I repeat, it is an amalgamation of various number of technologies, two words, block and chain. Now what is block and what is chain? So first we come to distributed ledgers. So blockchain is one type of a distributed ledger. So what distributed ledger means, we'll understand it with few slides ahead. So first of all, the definition. Distributed ledgers, it is a database that is consensually shared. Now, the highlighted text that you see on the screen, consensually shared, synchronized across multiple sites, institutions, and geographies, accessible by multiple people. All these highlighted text have got weight behind, a meaning behind, a function behind. So, distributed ledgers perform all these functions behind them. So, they are also known as shared ledgers or distributed ledger technology or replicated journal technology. These are basically same names of the same term, distributed ledgers. So let's understand from a Bitcoin's perspective what distributed ledgers are we talking about. So traditional way of sharing documents. Suppose there are two people on a network and they wish to share some kind of document with each other, Word document, suppose to say. So this document can be either shared on a local LAN or they can share it on an email, or they can share that this particular document on a pen drive or on a CD, or in person they can exchange this, or they can use Google Docs. They can work on Google Docs at the same time. But in case the number of people immediately multiply into millions, into lakhs, and if sufficient bandwidth is not available, there is likely to be a crash. So what are the choices for maintaining such kind of a network? How do we ensure that millions of people they do the transaction? So there are three options basically. One is centralized, which we are very much aware. One is decentralized. Decentralized, again, no need to explain. Basically it makes the complete centralized system into parts, which basically takes load, divides the load at other multiple center locations. Ultimately it is a kind of central thing only. But then we have got another network which is known as distributed network, and this is all what distributed ledgers will be based upon. So the ideal scenario will be everyone edits on their local copy of the document, and the internet takes care of the ensuring consistency. Everyone edits on their local copy. Now, all these transactions that we are talking about, I will connect it with the Bitcoin network as we proceed ahead. So the requirement is that every node maintains a local copy. Suppose there are 1,000 nodes, they are working on this document. So every node maintains a local copy. All the copies are identical. This is the characteristic of a distributed ledger. Then all these copies are updated on global information. So there is a global information which decides that this is the final thing, and that is immediately replicated and updated across the nodes. So each one has got the same copy. So in the nodes, when we speak about the distributed ledger nodes, these can be individual players in a distributed system. Individual player means you and me, one person or two persons. Then he should be capable of sending and receiving messages to and from each other. That's part of a node on a distributed network. So he should be capable of sending and receiving messages from his node. He has to be honest, faulty, or malicious, either of the three, because the algorithm will take care of the faulty and Byzantine nodes, and they should have a small memory and a processor. That's a small computing requirement at each node, which exhibits irrational behavior is Byzantine node. Irrational means any node which is planning or intending to do or attempts to do a malicious transaction. So that is known as the Byzantine node. And it is more famously known as the solution as Byzantine generals problem that we'll discuss ahead soon. So there are types of distributed ledgers. And again, building on the same things, there are permissioned blockchains and there are permissionless blockchains. So these basically determine that in case everyone is anybody on the network has to be pre-approved prior to doing any kind of transactions, that is known as permissioned. And permissionless is just like Bitcoin. You just need to download the client software and you are on the go, you can immediately participate. There is no need for any kind of permission that you need to take from the government or anybody. So it is also classified as per a consensus algorithm chosen. Now, consensus algorithms, I have one slide which I'll show you soon. Okay. Now, the characteristics of distributed ledgers. DLT database spreads across several nodes on P2P network. So these all characteristics will be used when we speak about the Bitcoin transactions. Each node replicates and stores an identical copy of the ledger, updates itself independently updates itself independently based on the consensus, and there is no central authority in a distributed ledger. As ledger updates, each node constructs a new transaction. The moment the network comes at one point of consistency, that everyone is same, the as per the nodes voting, as per the new transactions happening, new transactions keep getting appended in that ledger. And after consensus, now this consensus word is repetitive in my most of the talk, and this is the heart of blockchain. Now there are many hearts of blockchain. Whatever I say about the cryptography or digital signatures and various other technologies, each one has got a specific and a very peculiar role to play, without which blockchain cannot function. So again, this is consensus word, we'll discuss ahead. So this is one very important word from the blockchain perspective. So all nodes update themselves with new and correct copy of ledger, and the security is established with cryptographic keys and signatures. Now let's take an example to understand what are we talking about, what ledgers at a global level are we talking about. So this is the world map, the flat world that we live in. Suppose there are four people. These are A, B, C, and D. So these are four people who are in different continents and they are geographically apart. So let's bring them onto a slide and we deposit some kind of currency in their respective accounts. And for a assimilation purpose, here in this slide, I have taken rupees. But in a actual network, it will be not prefixing any kind of dollar or rupees. It will be just tokens. It will be just values. So for ease of assimilation, I have taken that all these people, they are of course they are in different parts of the world, but they are using the same currency. Otherwise, it is supposed to be a Bitcoin. It is supposed to be a token, a cryptocurrency. So A, B, C, D, they all are holding respective amounts in their um, accounts. Now A transfers rupees 200 to B. Now the A has transferred rupees 200 to B, but the effect is seen in population of the ledger at C and D also. Now C and D have got absolutely no concern of who A and B are, what transactions are they doing, and why are they doing, what is the reason behind. They need not know. But the moment a transaction happens, this transaction is immediately populated at C and D. Again, we go further. B, node B transfers 600 to D. Now, again, the participating nodes in this transaction are B and D, not A and C. But the moment this transaction happens, B transferred rupees 600, it is populated at A and C also. Similarly, going ahead, if A transfers rupees 10,000 to D, if A transfers rupees 10,000 to D, it is not possible. The system will halt this transaction, will not index this transaction, because this is not possible. This is wrong. So imagine these four people, multiply it them with thousands and hundreds. So all the participants are geographically located apart in a boundaryless cyber world, and all these nodes, blue lines that we are seeing, they are all doing respective transactions. So all these transactions are stored in a public ledger. Now, how are they stored in a public ledger? We'll see in detail also in while we dissect a block ahead. So all this basically it in the block, when these transactions are stored, these are not stored as A to B. These are not stored by name, Anupam to Rahul or somebody else to somebody else. These are stored as public key, which public address to which public address it has gone. So we'll see that in a blockchain explorer also. So again, coming back, distributed ledgers is a database that is consensually shared and synchronized and multiple sites, vagara. This is a repeat slide, but just connect what has basically happened in these transactions. So distributed ledgers nodes, they record, they share, and they synchronize transactions. Blockchain organizes data in blocks chained together in an append-only mode. So what is the Bitcoin Connect here? What are uh, while we are speaking about A to B, B to C, what is the Bitcoin Connect here? So the Bitcoin Connect is there. We multiply more people around the globe. They all do transactions, but there is one public ledger which is at the same time being populated at each of the node. So anybody who does the transaction at his node, the transactions start downloading at his node automatically. So there are when we speak about the Bitcoin blockchain, there are two three ways that a node can function. It can function as a full client. That means as on date the Bitcoin blockchain size is about 380 GB. So if that 380 GB the node allows to download, yes, becomes a full client. Or he can be a web client. That means he doesn't store anything, any node, but he accesses the same via a third party interface. Or he can be a partial client. That means he does not download the full blockchain, but the live blocks, they will keep appending. So all blockchains are distributed ledgers, but not all distributed ledgers are blockchains. I hope you have understood this, but in case you have any clarifications, we can always discuss it at the end. Thus, while blockchain represents uh, the distributed ledger, it is actually a subset of DLT. So in all, while we connect all these blocks, while we connect all these transactions, it is basically like a global Excel sheet. So this is a repeat slide. Okay, the today's current size of the blockchain, this we will see ahead. The blockchain Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, when I say that Bitcoin blockchain today is 380 GB, what does this mean? This means that the number of transactions which has happened from 3rd January 2009 onwards, the first Genesis block which was mined then, till that, from that day till date, all the transactions, they form a size which is approximately about 380 GBs. This is depicting the size of the complete blocks which have generated and been created. So hash algorithms are cardinal to complete network of any blockchain. So hash, I'll not discuss more because you are pretty familiar with hashes, etc. But what kind of hashes the Bitcoin blockchain uses? First of all, you must be aware of SHA-256. purpose, etc. Of course, we are aware of this deterministically, any length, fixed length. So whenever we speak about SHA 256 or RIPEMD 160 or MD5 sum, so whatever output we get, it is a fixed length result. So whenever we do a SHA 256, so message integrity is also issued, is also ensured. To achieve integrity, hash algorithms are used. So these are basically listing of, I've taken just a screenshot of various algorithms which are available, but we are interested in SHA-256 and RIPEMD 160. So these two hash algorithms are used in Bitcoin blockchain. So SHA-256, it belongs to the SHA-2 family, was first published in 2001. Major changes from its predecessor SHA-1, if you are aware, 2017, I think, SHA-1 was deprecated while it was broken by Google. Broken by Google hash algorithm, that means two files, two documents, they are different in nature, but the Google has been able to break that algorithm hash, which means that two different documents will have same hash. So they had produced and they have uploaded this also, these two documents, and in case you try and find the SHA-1 of it, so both will be same. So that goes against, absolutely against the basic hash concept. So SHA-2 has got various algorithms, SHA-224, SHA-256, etc. And 256 is the one that we'll be focusing. It produces a 256-bit hash value. Basically, it is giving us a hexadecimal value of 64 digits. So whenever we take a hash, so we get 489, etc. You can count it at, if it is a hex equivalent, so it will be about 64 digits. Similarly, we come to RIPEMD 160. So RIPEMD 160 is, it belongs to the RIPEMD hash family, and unlike SHA, it was first published in 92. And RIPEMD family also consists of 5 hash functions, which are 128, 160, and again among all these 256, 320, and 160, 160 is what is the most famous and what we'll be using here. So there now SHA 256 was 64-digit hexadecimal equivalent, and RIPMD 160 is got about 40 digit of hexadecimal numbers. So use okay, now since I had attended, so I'm pretty much aware that you all are conversant with the concepts of hash. So I'll not take you to this online site which is anyhash.com, which basically features, you type any text and you immediately get the hash value of that particular text as per various algorithms, SHA-256, MD5, RIPMD, etc., etc., all those algorithms altogether. So now, building on that hashes, we come to Merkle tree. Now Merkle tree, let's consider some data. Now we are aware of hash. Hash means we input anything. We input an image, we input a text, we input a data, we input anything. We will perforce get 64 digits of hexadecimal hash. So suppose we have got data 1, data 2, data 3, and data 4. We have got these data 4s. We take the respective hash values of it. Suppose these are all scattered apart geographically. So one is at a different location, others are at different locations, and they are all identified by their respective hash values. These data sets may be KBs, bytes, bits, nibbles, or GBs, or petabytes. But they will always produce a 64-digit hexadecimal if you apply a SHA-256. So after we get these hash values, we again take the hash values of 1 and 2. So 1 and 2, we get this combined hash of 1 and 2, we get as 33E26. Similarly, for 3 and 4, we get a combined hash of 3 and 4. We take combined hash, and again the combination that we achieve here in combining the hashes of 1 2 and 3 4, we again take another hash of it. So we have got a combined hash of 1 2 3 4. All the data sets, data 1 2 3 4, instead of 4 datas, 4 hashing 4 hashes, we have a way in form of a Merkle tree, wherein we can represent one hash value output, one hex value digit, to represent all these 4 data sets. So we'll again discuss in detail in a separate graph. Now suppose we have got various data sets, data 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. At the lower row that you see, that is the data 1, data 2, data 3, etc., up to 8. You take the respective hashes, hash 1, hash 2, hash 3. Then you take the respective hash of hashes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You again take the hash, you get 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you get hash 5, 6, 7, 8. Then again you take hash of 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, 6, 7, 8 together, and you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we get, for representing 8 data sets, we get one hash value 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now imagine there is some kind of a data tampering done in data 1. This data 1, the moment this data is tampered, the complete chain comes to know that there has been some modification done here. Now in terms of mechanics of the blockchain, this is not supposed to happen. Blocks, once indexed, once they are appended in the blockchain, they cannot be changed. Any kind of modification cannot be done. So a blockchain will never uh, enter this kind of indexing. Even if a node has been compromised, suppose there are about 1,000 lakhs of node, 10 lakh nodes, and of them one hacker has been able to come into a PC, and he has been able to break his PC's passwords, etc., and he has been able to do manipulation here, some transaction changes here. Even if he attempts that, that is not going to be taken by the blockchain, because the rest of the 9 lakh 90 whatever number of blocks remain apart from this, they are not their hash is not matching with this. So they will not take this hash into appending the earlier blocks. So this transaction is just not taken, negated. So now again there are two things that I would like to show you here. One is this, you can go, okay, we'll go here. Okay, now we have this uh, website. You simply write RGPV. So this is my data here. Now this is my data, and I have to construct a tree out of it. So I take 3 branches for it. I construct a tree. Now data is RGPV. I divide the chunk of my data, that is RGPV, into 3 chunks, and I construct a tree. Now I constructed a tree and it has got constructed in this manner. So this is the data set, RGPV, green, and red 2 to 1 is the Merkle root. Now go back to RGPV and do a modification here. And modification in the sense, I will not change any thing RGPV. It remains as it is, but I add a space here. So my cursor is currently now adjacent to V. I add a space here, simple space, and I construct the tree again. So RGPV remains the same, but I have added a space. The moment I add here, construct tree, so this will change. So this completely has changed. The Merkle tree has changed. So this is just a representative schematic of what Merkle tree basically functions like. Now, again, the other thing that I wanted to show you is there is a Merkle root that I have taken for. Okay, now first of all, I'll show you. Okay, now this is one block 28619. I have made a Merkle script. I've made a small script which will calculate the Merkle root in one single stroke. Now, what needs to be done here? First of all, I'll show you this what the script is about. So this is the simple. Okay, this is the simple script which is being seen currently on the screen. And down as you go, you see a number of hashes here. All these hashes, what you see on the screen, these are SHA-256 hashes. These are 64 digit in length, and these hashes are representing transactions, unique transactions, which are indexed inside this block. Now the block is 286819. So I go to this terminal and I simply have indexed all the transactions here. Now go to this website again. It list says the number of transactions is 99. This block was generated in 2014. This has got 99 transactions. Now, where are these transactions? as you scroll down below, and this is available on any blockchain explorer. You simply go there and you see what all transactions are there, what all amounts have been transferred from which public key to which public key. So here we are speaking about hash. Now 00BAF, this is one hash of this transaction. 91C5E, this is one hash of this transaction. And similarly, I have got 99 transactions. So these 99 transaction hashes I have added here, 091C59 and so on. Now I will simply run this script. So here we get 87174. So this is single enter that I pressed, and immediately the hash was produced because it will not take time. Now what is this root? Merkle root. Where is it visible? Now we go back to the same page and we go back to the block details. If you see Merkle root here, now might be visible. So Merkle root here, whatever I have calculated in that script 8714 CD, wide this script, the complete same thing, and 9978A, I can see here 9978A. So this is the complete Merkle root. That's the way the Merkle roots are compiled and calculated. So first thing is the transactions. How are we calculating these Merkle trees? So basically hashes are we are taking hashes of transactions and then combining together to form one single hash value that is known as the Merkle root. Now there are various other things which are available on this block. So for the timing, we'll just read out hash. Of course, we are aware confirmations. Confirmations basically means that so many confirmations have taken after this block has been indexed inside the block. Timestamp simply says this block was timestamped on, was created on so and so date. Height is the number of blocks, that is 286819. Miner, who was the miner, how many are the transactions. Difficulty, now this is one interesting part. This is difficulty. Now what is this difficulty and how is it calculated, and what it is doing here, what does this mean, difficulty here? So, okay, one more thing that you remember here is hash. You need not remember complete hash here, but you just remember that this hash, the block hash, is prefixed by a number of zeros. Currently, I think 12 or 13 zeros are there. What you see on the screen, these highlighted zeros. So just remember that there were certain zeros in prefixed with the block hash, and there is a nonce value also, 856192328. There is a nonce value also. So all these terms we will now discuss ahead. So we come back to the presentation. So now we will discuss about, now we have discussed about the hashes and Merkle trees. Now connecting all these. So this just a schematic purpose representation that you will be aware. Now consider red wagon as the genesis block. This is the first block. All the blocks, all the blocks 1 2 3, all the bogies, they may be represented in form of a number, block 0, block 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Now remember this slide which I had shown you while I was discussing about the Bitcoin blockchain transactions being populated in each node's public ledger. So you remember this public ledger. So now coming back to here, this public ledger is the data. So now this data represents block 1, block 2, block 3, etc. uh, Basically it is not as simple as that, but this is a schematic for schematic understand, because each block has got about 1500 to 1600 transactions now, not just one transaction. So what happens is the connectivity is simple. The hash of data block 0 will be stored in block 1, and similarly the train goes on. The hash of these are basically stored with the of the prefixing blocks. So any modification which is attempted in any of the blocks, even later down the years, so blockchain immediately comes to know because the hash value changes. So the this is the way the complete blocks are represented. So this is basically generic representation. Now concept third, again this is a very important thing, but I'll not discuss much because I'm sure symmetric encryption, asymmetric encryption, public keys, private keys, you must be pretty well versed with. But the function part we can discuss. Public key encrypts, private key decrypts. Private key digitally signs, public verifies the signature. Private authenticates, public verifies the authentication. And it is well understood that public key is open to everyone, but private key is just like a very critical password. It remains with the user only. So these are all basic schematics of the showing the functions of what the digital signatures and what signing means. Basically non-repudiation. In case you have sent a message signed by your key, you cannot later on deny that I have not signed this, somebody else has forged my signatures. With a private key, the things are pretty much deterministic, that this sign has been used by this private key and he is the owner. So nobody can repudiate, nobody can say no at a later date that this I have not sent. So again, this is a simple thing. Now we go to a Linux terminal and we go to this particular site. Now I will, this is uh, currently this is a blank directory. Now I will create a private key. This private key is created, private anupam.pem. Now from this private key, I will be generating a public key. Now again, it is a matter of common knowledge that from a private key you will be able to make out and decode a public key, but from a public key you will never be able to make out what the private key is. So here I generated a private key, and I from that private key I generated a public key. So now I have got two files instead of blank. I've got two files, one is private anupam, one is public anupam.pm. Now okay, now I'll just write uh, a text which will be saved as anupam.txt echo anupam presentation. So that's my small file which I have created, and I'll again remove the clutter. And in case I say more anupam.txt, so it is anupam presentation. This is the text inside. In case I take a hash value of this md5 sum anupam.txt, so I'll get cad5. So you remember this, this is the message, and I am going to sign it with the private key, and I will later on decrypt, sorry, I will sign it with the encrypt with the public key, and then I will decrypt it with the private key. So I have got three files now. So I have got a private key, I have got a public key, I have got a text file anupam. Now I will encrypt with the uh, public key. So this is the command executed, and I have created a encrypted file out of anupam.txt as sample.enc. Now in case I do the directory listing, I will again get four files. Now sample.enc is also there. Now you remember the hash value cad5. Now I remove this anupam.txt. I removed this text, and now I simply decrypt the encrypted file, that is sample.enc. I when I decrypt it, it comes out as a sample text. Now what does this mean? So I've got a private key, I've got a public key, I've got a sample encrypted file, and now that sample encrypted file I have decrypted with the help of a private key into sample.txt. Now sample.txt, in case I take the uh, hash value again, so it will be cad5. So cad5, and in case you go up little above, you will be able to check that this is the same file. So what does this demo basically show? It basically shows a very simple thing, that on the terminal, when you're doing all these encryption, decryption, etc., in case you have to get conversant with reading a block, etc., you have to be very much conversant with what signs what, how to decrypt from that lot, because everything, when you start getting into the technicalities, once you open a block, it will be completely in hexadecimal form, and when it is in hexadecimal form, you will have to, there will be some kind of signatures also, you will have to decode those signatures. And this is one simple teaser of what basically things are behind the scenes. Okay, now this is another example. what goes behind a simple address. Now, suppose I had a sample key. I have generated a private key. I earlier said that from a private key, you will be able to decode a public key. Now here I have generated a private key, and what I am planning is from this private key, I will create a Bitcoin address. Now there are a number of steps that go behind, which basically hover again around SHA-256 and RIP EMD 160. So these two hashes, when applied in various stages in as per the requirement of the Bitcoin address generation, these are applied in the manner that I'm showing you here. So we have got a private key. This From this private key, we have been able to derive a public key. From this public key, we take hex of SHA-256 and we get the hex value of SHA-256 as seen on the screen. Of this hash SHA-256, you take a RIPEMD 160. Again, these are all screenshots that I have taken since I never wanted to type everything and then waste time. So these are all legitimate. You can take these screenshots and you can try it on your respective terminals. Then you take the RIPMD 160 hash. So this is a reduced length because RIPMD was 40. Now add the version bytes here. Now 0x00 is for the main network. There are networks again. There are for Bitcoin again. There are various networks. One is the mainnet and one is the testnet. So testnet is again for researchers and students who will be able to do transactions on a Bitcoin network, see them on a blockchain explorer, which is again different for the test network. So herein we prefix the earlier output 109667. We prefix it with two zeros. Again, we perform a SHA-256, and these processes go on. I'll not explain, but these are absolutely available on websites. And at the end, we get a Bitcoin address. Now, peculiarity of a Bitcoin address is that it starts mostly with one, but after SegWit, after multi signatures have arrived, there are Bitcoin addresses that we will see on the Blockchain Explorer that also start with three. So they represent multi-sig, that is multi-signatures, and they start with three. So if you have to identify Bitcoin address which is randomly given to you, कि suppose करो ये Bitcoin address है या नहीं है, so you can just check it whether it is starting from one or three. So it may be a Bitcoin address. So this website that is mentioned, Go Bittest App Soft, etc. So this is one website wherein you will be able to see the complete calculations. I'll show you. So this is the complete schematic process. Looks little confusing, but when you do it for the first time, you might not get the expected result, because even hashes, though they seem simple, but when you start calculating them and then you uh, do the hexadecimals of hashes and then you convert back to decimals, etc., as you will do it for once here, so you will find it little challenging in the beginning, but after you do it few times, you will be absolutely able to make out from a private key, you will be able to generate a Bitcoin address. So in all, in the complete Bitcoin ecosystem network blockchain, 1.46 into 10 to the power 48 are the number of possible addresses. This is the number of possible Bitcoin addresses which are available globally. So that gives, in case we divide by the current population of the globe, that's about 7.5 billion people. So simply one person per person, that will give about 2.05 into 10 to the power 38 addresses to transact on. So that is why the cyber criminals, this is a lottery for them. For lottery for them in the sense, suppose in the current scenario of banks, if how many accounts can he fake? 10, 20, 50, 100, 200, 250 accounts per person. Ultimately he'll be somewhere caught by the law enforcement agencies. But in a Bitcoin scenario, you this thing, the complete accounts thing, in case you do about 50 transactions and all those 50 transactions are done by different public keys from different addresses, so this is controlled by the wallet which the user is using. Now wallet, again it is a complete different ecosystem. I'll, if we get time, I'll touch upon that. So just revise ECC. So this is very important. ECC, elliptical curve cryptography. Now there is a reason behind of why we are using this ECC. So just for or your revision, linear equation is y is equal to mx plus c. Simple straight line, y is the slope, y is m is the slope, and rest are the constants and the variables. Then we have got a quadratic equation, y is equal to ax square plus bx plus c. We have got a constant, we have got a variable, and then we have got x and y coordinates here. So this forms in this particular shape. Cubic equations, basically they come in this form, y is equal to ax cube plus bx square plus cx plus d. What now I am arriving at is a Bitcoin equation. There is a Bitcoin equation also. What Bitcoin equation is, again it is complete maths. So elliptical curve equation. Now Bitcoin equation has got peculiar constants that I'll discuss again. So elliptical curve equation is y square is equal to x cube plus ax plus b. Though, so the difference is y square is on the left side and x cube, the cubic part of the x, is on the right side. So that makes a curve like this always. So this will be known as the elliptical curve. Now let's see finite field mathematics. Now again I will discuss this why we use finite field mathematics ahead. So what is finite field mathematics? Now it is also known as Galois fields, and not much of it, but few peculiar characteristics of this finite field mathematics, because they are directly connected with the cryptography part, the signatures part, the ECDSA part, the public key and the private keys being generated. So finite side, basically that means multiplication, addition, subtraction, and division are defined and satisfy the rules of arithmetic. So the rules are satisfied, but it is not exactly the same algebra that you and me know. In case we know 3 plus 7 is equal to 10, in a finite field, in case we are doing it over a prime number, the results are going to be surprising for if you are not aware of what finite field mathematics is. So these are basically five properties which we'll use in one script. Now again, finite field properties, from a overview purpose only, from a overall perspective only, in case we need to understand it, there are many YouTube videos available for, but they are pretty complex to start with only. But once you get familiar, so then you get aware of the uh, things. But why all this? Why are we using finite field mathematics in blockchain? Okay, now there is a reason to it. That reason again, I think I've shown in some other slide. So in the normal course of mathematics, 11 plus 6 is 17, 17 minus 6 is 11, 8 plus 14 is 22, 4 minus 12 is minus 8. So this is the normal maths that you and me know, the calculator knows. But when we do it with finite field mathematics, with a prime number of f19, with a prime number of 19, so 11 plus 6 will be 17 mod 19. So that will be 17. 17 minus 6 will be 17. Sorry, 11 mod 19 will be 11. So here with things are okay. 11 plus 6 7 17 ही होता है. 17 minus 6 11 होता है. So of course there is no difference. But here comes the difference. 8 plus 14 is not 22. It is 3. 4 minus 12 is not minus 8. It is 11. So why are these happening and what is the maths behind? You just need to practice it and come over with it. That how basically it works. So even multiplication, 2 into 4 is 8, 7 into 3 is not 21, it is 2, 15 into 4 60, mod 19 is 3, 11 into 11 is not 121, it is 11 into 11 mod 19. Because whenever we do finite field mathematics, it is over a prime number. So here I have taken the prime number as 19. So 121 mod 19 is equal to 7. And after addition, subtraction, multiplication, we have got division left. So 2 by 3. Again, it is not going to be that the simple algebra. Here we use the Fermat's little theorem. Fermat's little theorem, when we apply it, we get 2 by 3 into, this is the formula, and we get 2 by 3 is equal to 7. 3 by 15 is equal to 4. But why are we using all this? This is the question. The simple answer is that, again, I will give you a demonstration on this. One single line, but you will have to find the answer on your own. We come to the terminal. We come to the Python terminal. We come to Python, and now here, in case you have any Python terminal around you, or Java terminal, or any programming language terminal that you have around you, simply add 0.1 plus 0.2. This is 0.3. No, This is 0.3 prefixed by suffixed by a number of zeros and then 4. So why is this? The reason to explain this 0.1 plus 0.2, you do it in any programming language, this is a bug. Now this bug is not because of mathematics. Mathematics is not wrong, but there are limitations to the computing of normal algebra. So there, if you try to find out the answer, you will have about 4 or 5 web pages which are defining this answer in detail, and you must know, so that you come to know the limitations of the normal algebra vis-a-vis the computing resources that we are basically using. So coming back to the presentation. Okay, now ECDSA is the cryptography behind private and public keys. Now, why do we use this public key? Why do we use this ECDSA? Why not? There are multiple public key and private key generator algorithms, like we have got AES or we have got RSA, etc. We have got so many things as option. But why elliptical curve? The magic is you when you do it yourself. Now, the thing is, in blockchain, data is crucial. The size is crucial. You have to have the smallest size so that you can fit in more number of data, more number of transaction inside the same block, so that you get you have to focus on narrowing down whatever you can shorten or you can reduce. So this is one algorithm which gives uh, a much more stronger cryptography vis-a-vis the other in a relatively shorter length. So on the screen when you see 192, the equivalent security which is provided by the RSA key length is 1536. 192 and 1536, you see the difference. It is approximately about 7-8 times. Again, 224 of elliptical curve key length is equivalent to a RSA key length of 2048, providing the same security but using a relatively less number of data elements. On the red side, you see parameters. Now, parameters like SecP 192K, etc. These are all various standards, again given by a cryptography standard body. And here on, we will be interested in SEC 256K1. So this is the one that we'll be interested in, SEC P256K1. Now, what is this SEC P256K1? It refers to the parameters of elliptical curve used in the Bitcoin's public key cryptography. Now, when I said at the onset of this ECDSA that we are doing all this to get the Bitcoin equation. So when we speak about the Bitcoin equation, we have to have some set of constants and data that will be used in that elliptical curve equation. Y square is equal to x cube plus ax plus b. In that, there will be a, there will be b as constants, and there will be a whole lot of numbers that are defined in sec p sec 25 sec 256k1. So yeah, Bitcoin and Ethereum both use elliptical curve cryptography for generating the private and the public key. So these are basically the reasons. And the important thing is standards for efficient cryptographic group. This is the body that I was talking about, which defines the standards. So SECG has published a document with the recommended sets of standards of elliptical curve domain parameters, referred to as by PABGNH. Now, in the earlier slide, there was some mention of a sextuple. So this is the T, which is which we'll be seeing in the standard. So we'll go to this website. This is the complete extract, the simple one-page extract that I have screenshot that I have taken. But we'll go to this website secg.org. We come here and we come to this page. Now this is a live thing that secg.org, etc. So this is the page that we are interested in. 2.4.1 sec p256k1. Now there are a number of constants. There are 6 constants that you have to be aware of here: p, a, b, and this is the generator point, and these are the values which we get uh, in form of compressed form. And then we have got n, and then we've got h. So these are basically constants defined. So once we use these constants in a elliptical curve equation, then we get the signed public key. So we get the public key from the private key. So coming to the presentation, mm, yeah. So coming to the presentation, so 13th page of 37 page document, this defines the standards, and these are the basically y square is equal to x cube plus 7 is the Bitcoin equation. Now, apart from that sec P256K1 standard, the six variables that I had just shown you, P, A, B, G, and H, apart from these, the other two values, A and B, they are defined as A is equal to 0 and B is equal to 7. So these two plus six values, they define the Bitcoin equation. So while we speak in general, ECDSA, elliptical curve equation, y square is equal to x cube plus ax plus b mod p. Now what is p? P is the prime number. Prime number means in case we put the values a is equal to 0, b is equal to 7, p is equal to this, we get y square is equal to x cube plus 7 mod p. Now this is the equation of Bitcoin. So simple thing is, how do we derive public key of a elliptical curve? Public key is equal to private key into generator point. Now again, I'll take you to the terminal. So coming to the terminal, mm, cd Bitcoin, and here first of all I'll show you the script, what it is. So this is a simple elliptical curve presentation. This I have not written, but I have just taken it from the open source domain, wherein this is a very small script, about 44 45 lines. All the standards have been defined. This is the prime number that we were talking about. So in case we simply take this and we try to calculate it, we will simply do it. We take the hex of this. Okay, first of all, we'll calculate this. So we'll calculate this as, so this is 1157, etc. 115792. So this is the same thing that we have got here. Uh, okay, now we'll have to convert it into hex. So this is the prime number. This we have got this, and now in case we take the hex value of this, we place it here, and we take the hex value. So this is 0xFFFFFF, etc. C2FL. So this comes equivalent to the standard that we were referring to. FFFF C2F. So this is the equivalent hex value of that. Now again coming. Now why am I showing this? Basically, you have to be while you go and intrude deeply into the cryptography part, you are bound to encounter all this, and you will be bound to calculate and understand all this. What is the generator point, etc. So this is the generator point, which is mentioned as G. This is the G point, etc. And here, what am I trying to derive is that I have mentioned a private key here, and by using this algorithm, this small script, I will be calculating the public key. So this is the 0xA0D. This is the private key. Now I have to derive the equivalent public key. So it is a matter of simple multiplication. You remember this slide? Public key is equal to private key into generator point. So simply I am doing this into the generator point. Generator point is X. Now why we do not take? Because y is a constant. You have, in case you have x, you'll definitely have the y portion of it, because it is elliptically mirroring to each other. So we simply multiply 55066 and this, and what we get is the single line answer. So public key, the generation, private key is this, the uncompressed private key is this, and it is given the equivalent of hex and compressed form. So this is the way from a private we are generating a public key. Now this is the same thing which is used in most of the wallets also, because Bitcoin follows this ECDSA, means the wallets are supposed to follow all these algorithms, private keys and public keys, etc. of elliptical curve. So coming back to the presentation. So till now what we have seen is basically it is chunks of info that can be used to mathematically guarantee the messages. So whatever we are doing, we are sending, we are receiving, we are populating, we are indexing something, or we are checking the hash, they are completely moving around the mathematics. It is a mathematical guarantee whatever we are ensuring. Another concept, this will not take few seconds only. So it is the p2p between a central architecture. We have got the other option as p2p, and p2p is used in the distributed ledger. Then concept fifth. Now this is the most important. I think this is 5 p.m. So we'll take another about 10-15 minutes. But this is the part which I was talking about: the nonce, the proof of work, the Byzantine general, and this target and difficulty. So these five terms, how are they playing the mechanics behind? So this is known as proof of work. Consensus, what we are talking about for next about 10-15 minutes from now on, will be known as proof of work. A proof means a way that I can prove that I have done the work. In most simplest manner, consensus is defined as a general agreement of a state. Simple अंग्रेजी है. Consensus मतलब agreement. There is an agreement among a set of peoples. That means in blockchain, when we are speaking about transactions, it means that if Mr. Karan sends one Bitcoin to Mr. Arjun, so there is a simple credit and a simple debit between two accounts. Again, I am not taking into consideration here the transaction fees. It is not supposed to happen this way. It's simply in case somebody is holding one Bitcoin, he will not be able to transfer exactly one Bitcoin there. He will have to part with some Satoshis uh, to the miner. Now what is this miner, what transaction fee am I talking about? We'll come to that later, but for now you just take into account that simple credit and debit, this has to be recorded on a blockchain. So every clean transaction has to be recorded on the Bitcoin public ledger, and a consensus algorithm ensures no malicious transactions nor changes can be made on the blockchain itself. So this slide basically, this paper I had written about the review of consensus algorithms. So I had reviewed about 50 algorithms, and this chart I had made based on those, what types of algorithms are currently available, what are their pros and cons. So this gives a overview of what proof of work is, what proof of stake is, what are the other consensus types available. It is just not proof of work is there, or proof of stake is there, or proof of burn is there. There are about 50 plus, and they are actually increasing. So now we focus is proof of work. So the one line is, first of all, this English is simple. It is a piece of data which is difficult to produce but easy for others to verify, and which satisfy certain requirements. You remember this uh, sentences? You remember this sentence is a piece of data which is difficult to produce, okay, but easy for others to verify. Now what we are going to see ahead, you'll be immediately able to correlate when I repeat this sentence again at the end of the slide. So it is known as Byzantine generals. Reaching a consensus proof of work is based on Byzantine generals. So what is Byzantine general, and what connection it has got to do with the blockchain perspective? Attempting to explain the same in a story form for easy assimilation. So just pay your ears and attention in case you're not aware. My endeavor is that in case somebody still has a confusion of nonce, target, difficulty, they will be absolutely clear in case they lend their ears for next about 15-20 minutes. So it is an analogical connect. First of all, we will assume a situation, and that situation, whatever we assume, we will analogically connect with the Bitcoin peers and Bitcoin nodes. So the situation is like, in the back old days, there were two armies. So there was a fort in between. So this is army one, and this is army two. So we have got two armies. We have got one fort in between, and both the armies are geographically apart at supposedly huge distances. So these are good old days. Basically, they have got no mobile communication, but they this is the envisaged situation. So there is a fort in between. There are two armies geographically apart, and these two armies have decided that they need to attack the fort. The requirement is that both have to attack at the same time. Otherwise, In case army 1 attacks on some other day and army 2 attacks on some on maybe on the same day but at a different time, the fort is going to reign supreme. So in order that army 1 and army 2 they attack this fort successfully, a consensus has to be attained that they have to attack at the same time. So how do they achieve this consensus? So they send, where is the rider? Okay, हाँ. So they send a rider, एक मैसेंजर को भेजते हैं वो, फ्रॉम आर्मी 1 to army 2 with the message that attack Monday is the message. So this guy goes to army 2 and he delivers the message attack Monday, and he comes back and he confirms to army 1 that yes sir मैंने बता दिया है, both attack Monday उनको भी बता दिया है. Now both generals agree as per the exchange of message. Now this is a very ideal situation in the world of anything, in any domain where humans are part of. Ideal situations बहुत कम होती हैं. So here there is a chance that this messenger, he may be intercepted, he may be bribed, or the message may be changed altogether. From attack Monday, his message may be changed to attack Wednesday. Now, when this attack is being planned, so this message has chances of being compromised. So thus, attack Monday can become attack Wednesday. So there is a requirement of secure communication between Army 1 and Army 2. Now, how to ensure that this message, what is being sent, attack Monday, is sent to Army 2 without any modification? So they come up with some unique technique. So first of all, we'll discuss about the security part. Now, this is an extract from a very renowned security book by William Stallings, wherein it mentions, and it is relatable to each one of us. In fact, each one of us means that from the computer domain, from the IT domain, it has been proved indisputably that the problem has got no true solution. That's not to say that computers cannot communicate with each other reliably, but 100% certainty is not there. Best efforts simply make the communication very, very reliable, but never foolproof. So whether now you start relating it with either your encryption or decryption, etc., you are making the things tough, but foolproof it is never. And whenever you think you have made some kind of a foolproof system, or when any vendor thinks that he has got made a foolproof operating system or some kind of software, the next day reports come in the as a breaking news. So this solution is proof of work. Now, what are we doing? Attack Monday, we take the hash of attack Monday. We get easily 8CD, 65C, etc. There is absolutely no problem. That attack Monday का मैंने immediately इसमें hash मेरे को निकल जाएगा. Not even second. The moment I press the button, ये hash निकल जाएगा. अब इसमें मैं एक terms and condition लगा देता हूँ. The terms and conditions are that whenever I take the hash of attack Monday, it has to be prefixed by 7 zeros. The condition is that the prefix of the output hash should be such that the hash is prefixed by 7 zeros. Now, when I take attack Monday, I should ideally get the result as prefixed 7 zeros and then the hash value. Now, how is it possible? How? Because attack Monday ka jo hash hai, it is unique. And whenever it is unique, so I cannot fiddle with it. Message has to remain same. So the answer is nonce. Now, what is nonce doing here? Now we have got attack Monday. This is the hash. Now we add a salt. We add a nonce to it. Nonce means in case I add this number 61584 with attack Monday in the message, then the combined hash will be achieved as 7 zeros, D1, A2, etc. etc. So this is the output hash which is prefixed by 7 zeros. So the important thing is, most important, which is that nonce cannot be calculated by a formula. It can only be guessed. So there is no formula which can calculate this. It has to be guessed. Now, okay, coming back to the fort and enemy problem. So difficult to calculate, easy to verify. Now the difficult to calculate is that number nonce. I have to calculate, I have to find that number somehow. But it is very easy to verify by third party. So in case I am able to calculate that nonce and I share it with somebody else कि ये मैसेज में ये वाला आप नॉन्स डाल लीजिएगा तो यू विल गेट दी combined the desired output of 7 zeros prefixed. So this is the requirement, and this is the way. So difficult to calculate means I have to calculate that nonce, and easy to verify means the third party or the other party which I am sending the message to, he will not be requiring to calculate that. He will just be adding that number to the message, and simply the hash value will be prefixed by 7 zeros. Now coming back to this, now what happens is messenger goes with the nonce. Now army 1 and army 2 have come up with this idea that they will find the nonce and they will add attack monday to it, and they will get the hash. So the messenger goes with the attack monday nonce, he gives it to army 2, and he returns back. Now when he returns back,
तो सब रजत को फोन करके देख ले, उसका फोन आ रहा था क्या क्या। हाँ मैं काट दिया।
now when he returns back,
अभी आया।
I'll request you to mute somebody speaking, I think. Now when the messenger comes back to army 1, he confirms that the message has been delivered, and both armies, army 1 and army 2, they reach a consensus that on so and so date and so time they arrive at a common time. But the story does not end here. It is not as simple as that, because problems will always be there. Now the middle fort is aware that these two generals are playing smart and they are doing some cryptography, so I will buy a huge computer. So what he does is he gets ready with that much of computing power, computer hardware, that will be able to create nonce for attack Wednesday immediately. So he has got that kind of power. So the town is now well aware of the tricks that these generals are using. So they simply purchase a giant supercomputer, and when they catch a messenger, they now have to the computing resources to modify the nonce so that that 7 zeros property is satisfied, and attack Monday can be done to attack Wednesday with a new nonce, and the army 2 will be able to check that message with that nonce and immediately be satisfied. Yes, 7 zeros have come, so this is the right message. So we add more computing requirements. Now army 1 adds more computing requirements, means jo what we were planning for 7 zeros, now it is 8 zeros or maybe 9 zeros. So the more number of zeros that I add, I am making it difficult for somebody to break that nonce easily, and to find that nonce easily, and I'm making things difficult for the other guy, for the fort. So what is the connect with Bitcoin consensus? Now let's say there are not two generals and one city. This we had done for the assimilation part, but now assume that there are lots of generals and lots of forts and cities. So whenever we have got many kings and many cities and many forts, the idea works best. Now suppose we have got army 1, army 2, army 3, army 4, 5, 6, 12, and now we have got forts also, and these do transactions. So all of them, these are different armies, these are different generals, these are different forts. The generals all combine their messages into a single giant message, which gets but a single nonce at the end of it. So there may be about 1500 such messages that they all have different messages. Some say attack noon, attack dawn, attack midnight, attack whatever day. But when they combine together in a block of 1500 transactions, 1600 transactions, then there is a single nonce to the effect. So in case somebody has to verify, he can just check with this nonce. So all generals take the combined message block and set all of their computers to go on the great nonce hunt. Perhaps there are 1,000 armies and each army has many computers. So their combined efforts may find a working nonce in a reasonable amount of time. So when computing resources are combined, so of course the capacity increases, and it may be a relatively easy job to find the nonce. So it takes for all these messages, you take that there is only one nonce which can satisfy the complete set of messages, one nonce. Now is there a question worrying you? There may be a question worrying you कि आप उससे और आगे चलते हैं, अगर फोर्ट, क्या पता फोर्ट के पास उसने और भी गीगा कंप्यूटर्स ले लिए हैं, क्वांटम कंप्यूटर्स ले लिए हैं. सो वेट, व्हाट इफ ऑल द सिटीज बॉट सुपर कंप्यूटर्स एंड डिड द सेम थिंग्स द जनरल्स डिड, team up to find a nonce? Yes, this is possible. Now again, here I'm only giving you a mention of it. Now this is known as 51% attack. Now there have been attacks on the Bitcoin blockchain and Ethereum blockchains, the two most powerful and most well-renowned blockchains. Till date, there have been about identifiably 3-4 attacks on each of them, wherein the miners have reached a state wherein they could control more than 51% of the computing requirements. Now, if you remember, when I had taken you to the block explorer, there I had showed you the block hash prefixed by 14 zeros, I think 12, 13, 14 zeros. So that was in 2014. Over a period of time, this difficulty has been increasing. As on date, if you do go to any blockchain explorer and you check, so you are bound to get 19 zeros. So this difficulty level has been increasing. So proof of work consensus. So we'll go to this any blockchain explorer. So okay, first of all, this I forgot to show you earlier. This is the Go Bit Test AppSpot address. This I will. This is there in the presentation. So this is one website wherein you create a random private key. This I have created, and whatever number of steps that I had shown you there, SHA-256, then SHA, second round of SHA-256, then RIPMD, then adding network bytes to it, etc. All these steps are done in one single stroke, and you directly get the Bitcoin address. So for the first time when I had done this manually, getting a public key from a private key, this thereafter hashing, there were teething issues, but ultimately once you do it, it is for lifetime. So you have to do it once so that you get aware of this. So now we were going to a blockchain explorer. Okay, Merkle also we can close. Okay. So this is the live blockchain explorer. And here we see that 11 minutes before this block number 692875. Now, what is a block height? Block height means Satoshi Nakamoto, when he mined the first block, the Genesis block in 2009, 3rd January, that time, that block is known as Genesis block or block number 1. Thereafter, whatever number of blocks have been mined, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Today we have reached at 692875. Now, these blocks are mined every on an average 10 minutes. Every 10 minutes one block is mined with about 1600 transactions. So we'll go to this block 692875. We have come to 692875. Now it says that the block was mined on 27th July 21 at 1:40 p.m. Now, okay, this 1:40 p.m. is the GMT time. Means uh, this is the, sorry, this is not the GMT, but this is the UT, is the local time today uh, of GMT. So if it is if it is saying that it was mined 11 minutes back, that means 1716 minus 530. So we'll come around same time only. So here we have got this block hash which is prefixed by 19 zeros. So these are the zeros which are given as difficulty numbers to the miners. And then even case you see mining rewards, why are the miners interested? They are getting rewards, they are doing all this, they are investing all this hardware, etc. So this is the zeros that we were talking about. So this is there in every block, in any block in past or present or right at the beginning, in case you go to say about 1 hour back also. So every there will be hash which will be prefixed by 19 zeros. So this is the difficulty level. And now this difficulty level is changed every 2016 blocks. Now again we'll try to understand what 2016 blocks ye kahan se aa gaya. So coming back to the presentation, mining proof of consensus. Now again, coming back to this map, we have these transaction doing users of Bitcoin. They have respective distributed public ledgers with them, in which each of the transactions are populated. Now make it little more simple. Okay, now what is mining? So now we have understood what is proof of work. Now we have to apply that proof of work here on the transaction. So what is that? So the thing is A and B. So there are two people, A and B, and A and B, they both hold 1 Bitcoin each. Now A to B, A transaction is there which is intended to be done by A to B, wherein he plans to send one Bitcoin to B. Now, again, for precision purpose, this case will not be possible, but I have removed the transaction fee. Let transaction fee for the time being be zero. For assimilation purpose, let there be a transaction, one Bitcoin being transferred from A to B, so that A is left with zero. So the moment this transaction is done, coordinated, the transaction is populated in the nearest node, at the nearest node public ledger, and it is updated. It becomes green. Within a few minutes, the complete blockchain network starts getting populated with this green node, because a transaction has taken place. Now, till now, we are only speaking about the public ledger. Blockchain has not yet arrived. Mining has not yet arrived. Difficulty and target has not yet arrived. So now, while this is being populated, A also transfers one Bitcoin to C, another guy across the continent. So this transaction is also populated in the blockchain public ledger. So this is, though the earlier ones were green, now this is red. So the transaction which is populated at red, this is one Bitcoin. So what will happen here? What will it choose, red or will it choose green? So this is a clear case of double spending. Now, how will the blockchain decide which one is the correct thing? Neither the blockchain knows A nor B nor C. But what it knows is that few transactions have arrived at the blockchain for indexing into the public ledger. Now, for this assimilation purpose, we had taken an assumption that whenever a transaction takes place, it immediately directly gets populated in the block. But it is not this way. It does not happen this way in Bitcoin. So what Bitcoin does this, instead of directly publishing to the ledger, the public ledger, the transactions are first populated in mempool. Now, what mempool is, where all the valid transactions wait to be confirmed by the Bitcoin blockchain network, so that later on, after confirmation, they are indexed inside the block. A high mempool size. Now, whenever you go to any blockchain explorer, a high mempool size indicates that there is more traffic now, which will result in longer average confirmation time and higher priority fees. That is the transaction fees. A miner may not index your transaction till such time he is motivated by the transaction fee. So he will always take those transactions which are giving him relatively average or at least higher transaction fees. So instead of directly publishing to the public ledger, the transactions are published to the mempool. Now, whenever a new transaction is received, so mempool stores it in a random manner, and these transactions are not uniform apart. They are all random across the globe. Each node will have a different mempool. Each miner will have a different mempool. Each mempool will have different transactions. So all these transactions, all these is basically random, and they do not hold anything in common with each other. Here onwards, the transactions will be expecting in the mempool of various nodes and miners, etc. They will be expecting to get included in the candidate block. Now, what is this candidate block? Another term that we are starting here. Candidate block is a temporary block. First was the temporary mempool where the transactions are stored. Now we form a candidate block out of the mempool. It is a temporary block created using the transaction selected from the memory pool. This is random in nature, or this may be peculiar to the choice of the miner. So mining nodes select transactions from their memory pool to form their own candidate blocks. So each mempool, as I said, they are random, they are different from each other. So every node or every miner which is planning to mine those blocks will have different mempool, which will have different temporary blocks, etc., candidate blocks. So anyone who is mining can choose which transactions to include in their candidate block. Each node then tries to add the candidate block to the blockchain through the process of mining. Now here comes the Byzantine thing that we were doing, that nonce, etc. Now all these miners are racing hard among each other to include their block in the blockchain, because each block is going to reward them immensely. Now we'll come to that rewards in, I think it is 5:25, but okay, we'll take about 5-6 minutes. We'll at 5:30 I'll ask what time I can move on. Okay, now mempool. So basically the memory pool is a waiting room for new transactions, and mempool is a good metric to estimate how long the congestion will last. So coming back to this network, wherein the network was still confused of which transaction to take. So suppose there is a miner at node C. He takes that transaction. The moment he takes that transaction and he wins the mining the block, and he finds the nonce, the winning nonce, the complete blockchain which was erstwhile green, they will be replaced by the red block. That means the transaction from A to C has happened, but not A to B. The A to B has been dropped because it does not fit the arithmetic, and the transaction from A to C was chosen first by the miner. So this has indexed in the blockchain, and after few confirmations, this will be immutable. So allows mining, basically what is mining doing? Mining allows nodes globally in the network to resolve conflicts without the need for another mediating authority. Now, again, there's another thing to it, which is known as the target and difficulty. So we'll come to that, how mining works. So I'll not revise this. Okay, now till now have got a candidate block, we have got a mempool, and now a new term arrives here: target value, a number that a block hash. Now that block hash 000, there it is not open, in the sense it has to be below a number which is known as the target value. So जो target value है, how do we come to that target value and how do we calculate that target value is what is all about the next few slides. So target value tunes every 2016 blocks. So every 2016 blocks. Now one block is mined in an on an average about 10 minutes. So in a 2016 blocks will take around 2 weeks to mine. So every 2 weeks, the new difficulty, the new target value is calculated. Now Satoshi Nakamoto says to compensate for increasing hardware, that Moore's law, etc. He had well envisaged and he had mentioned in his source code, etc. So the whatever you read on the screen right now is by Satoshi Nakamoto's book. So if the hash of the block header is calculated not below the target, now the target value की जो मैं बात कर रहा हूँ, अगर वो जो hash मैंने निकाला है वो से नीचे है तो it is okay, but if it is not below, अगर वो उससे ऊपर है तो then you will have to tune with the nonce number, and uh, so that with one particular nonce you will be able to arrive at one block hash. So this allows to keep the same block header but allows to get a completely different hash result for it. So miners attempting may get lucky as they end up with the hash that is below the current target. So whichever miner wins, he will have to ensure that not only he gets the block, but the value that he gets is below the hash value. So uh, who was the moderator? I think Sabira or Professor Manoj, Professor
Yes,
Praveen.
sir.
Now the time is over actually. So how long would you be okay to bear with the talk? Dr. Piyush?
Sir, thank you very much.
Sir, so I just wanted to know, sir, now the time is up and 5:30 is there. So,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
so
It's a
we'll just
constant
get
that we
over.
have to close the college also. Yes, sir. Please, if
Exactly.
possible. keep in mind. Yes, sir.
There is absolutely no problem, but I'll just conclude with 5-6 slides. I
Okay,
will-
sure, sir. Within 5-10 minutes, 5
No,
minutes
I'll
within.
take 5:30. It will get over, sir.
Sure, sir. Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Sir. Now, the last few slides that I am going to show you here are in case you get interested in where to start from. Basically, this is the thing that I wish to present here. Where do I start learning the blockchain from? So this is basically a kind of small roadmap that I have given. First of all, read the Satoshi paper. You have to read this paper and understand it so that you get more clarity on the concepts. Do not hurry up to understand. There is कोई जल्दी नहीं है. take your time, but read and understand deliberately, because each and every nut bolt will be required. Consistency is the key. Okay, now again, other thing is get savvy with Linux. In case you are not conversant with what is Ubuntu, what is Linux, etc., terminals, etc., cryptography, public key, digital keys, you have to be familiar with this. Basic networking concepts, I'm sure most of us all are. Get savvy with scripting. Scripting is another important part. Then cryptography, basic commands, what to encrypt, how to decrypt, and how to sign a file, etc. Use virtual machines. Basics of finite mathematics, as I had said, you try and find out this zero point 0.1 plus zero point 0.2 myth. Then binary, octa, decimal numbers, what are these, how to convert from binary to hex and hex to binary, etc. Understanding hex editors, of course I could not take on, but I was planning to show you a block, but this Bitcoin block, otherwise when we dissect a block, what it looks like is what you see on the screen right now. So this is one block, the Genesis block. This is the 0th block of the Bitcoin. So this complete is in hexadecimal, and from hexadecimal you will have to make out useful information. Basic Python, good machines. And good machine doesn't mean that you have to have a server kind of a thing. I have a desktop with 3 TB hard disk and 16 GB RAM, so I'm able to basically suffice my blockchain, complete Bitcoin blockchain that I have downloaded. I keep playing with it. So YouTube is a sea of information. Keep watching tools, and in the morning session, I'm sure he must have given you some, and these are few more. Other platform which one can work upon is multi-chain. Multi-chain is absolutely a fork of Bitcoin. Then few useful books. These are my personal collection, but I'm just mentioning you out here because these are actually good books. I have read them completely end to end and find them absolutely a book. So it is up to you whether you buy it or you download on a Kindle. So Mastering Bitcoin, Mastering Ethereum, Mastering Blockchain. Now this has come up with the third version, Imran Bashir third edition. Everyday Cryptography, Attack of the 50-foot Blockchain, Introducing Ethereum Solidity. Groking Bitcoin is another very good book. Blockchain Revolution was one of the first books that I came across in 2015-16, I think. Then Building Blockchain Projects, VI and Vim. And this is an absolute beauty of a book, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Blockchains by Mr. Vijay Mukhi. Of course, unfortunately, he passed away a few years back. But this book is a Bible, I take it, true Bible. Then little bit of Python. Few links I'm sharing here. This you will be able to just watch out the key links that I follow for YouTube and blogs, etc. My journey, last 3 slides now. In August 2015 I started, and first 6 months I realized that I will know about 90% of the technology when I dedicate myself to the technology. So I thought, but over these 5 years that I have been basically diving in around Bitcoin and blockchain and platforms, etc., I know maybe about 1-2%. So the more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know. That basically suffices. Never stop learning. And the best thing about blockchain is everything is open source. You have everything to learn on open source. This you can just take a screenshot, or I've just uploaded few videos related to all the details that I could miss out today. Blockchain nuts and bolts. So you can just have a view of this. Basically contains. I've just started uploading few videos, and I plan populating about 40-50 more in detail of the nuts and bolts of blockchain mechanics. Thank you. That's all from my side, and I am open for questions if any.